Hey, Old Testament people! Today we're going to do intertestamental period, religious life of the Second Temple period. And I know I probably gave you a pretty not so nice looking map of the Temple Mount, but you're going to want to pull this out today because, as you can see on the screen here, the questions that are left are all about labeling the different parts of this map. Now, I've also just gone into Google and typed in ESV Temple Mount and free, and you get this. This is what you have there in your notes, but you can zoom in on it. Okay, so maybe I'll be using this today to help you fill in the details. Though obviously, this is the one that will be on the final, but you'll just be matching it up with these questions right here. So these are the ones that we're going to look for today. Have that handy, okay? We're going to look for Solomon's porch, court of the women, the fortress of Antonia, the court of the Gentiles, this wall of separation or the balustrade, gate of Nicanor, and the beautiful gate. That's it. That's what we're going to look for on the picture. Yeah. Alrighty. So let's get to it. Let's just look at this picture for a moment. Let's see if it shows us some of these things. Look at, there's Solomon's porch there along the edge going all the way around. What else are we looking for? We're looking for the court of the women. Okay, court of the women. I would guess that that would be one of these here. We got the court of the Gentiles, and then inside of that we've got, oh, there it is. I think I'm moving my face. The court of the women was the farthest point of the inner temple complex that women could enter. So in this chamber here, we've got the castle of the fortress of Antonia. That's over here on the corner, the northwest corner of the mount. Was where Herod and the Romans commanded the garrison in order to protect the temple and suppress religiously motivated rebellions. Court of the Gentiles. Okay, I already grabbed that. That'd be down here. The court of the Gentiles is this big space where you'd first come in. The wall of separation, there it is right there. The sorig, a low lattice screen or railing prohibiting Gentiles or non-purified Jews from entering the temple court. So it's this boundary here that you could go in through these gates. The gate of Nicanor. All right, that's this structure right here. I believe it's one of these two. Let me look at my other thing here. Yeah, this big one here is Nicanor's gate. Not labeled on this, but it's labeled on your other handout. And then we've got the beautiful gate, which is probably this gate right here. Okay, beautiful gate, gate of Nicanor. Beautiful gate, gate of Nicanor. There you go. Episode over. No, I'm just kidding. All right, I'm going to bust through these notes. You can hit pause and you can draw some stuff because the actual how this was built is pretty interesting. And as Pastor Grant said one time, these rocks look so totally Herodian. All right, so I've got mine filled in here. That's not important. It's Nicanor's gate, beautiful gate. You got the court of the women, court of Israel. You've got the court of the Gentiles, and then you got the balustrade or the sorig or that wall of separation. Solomon's porches.
It's about time.
Are along here.
Why don't you go outside or something?
Nerd. Okay, so this is technically the second temple, right? Because Solomon's temple was first. It was destroyed there in 586, and then Zerubbabel rebuilt kind of a small version, and then Herod, beginning in 19 BC, begins to expand that whole complex. And he poured a lot of money into it. So let's look at his construction plan here. First, number one, a reason for constructing and building up this Temple Mount is number one, to endear himself to his Jewish subjects. He wants them to be on his side. So he throws a bunch of money at this building project. Number two, to add respectability to the Jewish religion in the world. If you've got a big temple, like the Temple of Diana in Ephesus, or you've got the temple to Zeus or Apollo or to Athena in Athens, you've got a big place, you got the statue of Zeus at Olympus there in the Peloponnesus. Everybody's like, let's go check that place out. And now he's built up this beautiful, beautiful temple to add respectability to the Jewish religion. And so what does he do? He embellishes the courtyard and expands the mount. The old temple was on kind of like a hillock, and what he does is he backfills. He puts some walls out here, and he fills in that space with dirt and then flattens it all out. So now that it has been expanded to a 900 by 1,500 foot complex. There are valleys on both sides. On this side, you got the Kidron Valley, and on this side, you had the Central Valley. And so he builds up these walls, these retaining walls, backfills with dirt, flattens it out. And now you've got a much bigger complex to work with. And he put in those porches, he built in these areas where people could go, and then the Sadducees built shops and all that kind of stuff in there. The priest's role in this whole thing, because Herod's like not 100% Jewish, is that he trains 1,000 priests as masons, that's like stone workers, carpenters, etc., so that they could go into the holy places and work on the temple. That way we don't defile these places with these Gentile workers. It's all Levites where they're allowed to go and do the construction. Construction time, at first 10 years for looks, and then really then the rest of it was just fine-tuning and building up stuff that was already there. It was totally finished by AD 64. So even when Jesus looks over the temple and he's looking at it and he says, destroy this temple and in 3 days I'll rebuild it. And the people are like, what? It's ridiculous. They said to him, look, this thing has been taking 46 years, I think is what they say to Jesus in John chapter 2, to build this thing. You're going to build it up. You're going to build it in 3 days. And he was really referring to his body. Yeah, 46 years to build this temple. It actually was a full, as you can do the math there, a very long time. 19 and 60, 70 something years that it took to build the whole stinking thing. The description of the court here, first the outer court or the court of the Gentiles. Again, find that on your map or go to, again, esvmedia.org and pull up their beautiful picture of the Temple Mount. And we're looking at this part out here outside of that fence, the court of the Gentiles. Okay, and on this picture it would be out here. Okay, Gentiles are allowed in certain parts outside the gate. You've got several important features in the outer court. You've got the pinnacle of the temple, and it's a little controversial exactly where that is. I think these folks think that it's, let's see, it's either probably this part or this part. One of the southwest or the southeast corners. Though, yeah, we're not sure, and the text isn't clear, but everybody in that time would have known, right? That's where Satan took Jesus when he was tempting him. So again, some say it's the southeast corner because that's a pretty big drop down to the Kidron Valley. A good 400-foot drop. Again, let's look at that. It would be like here and then dropping down into this valley. Some say it's the other corner where they would blow the trumpet, the shofar, to call people to worship. The place of announcement, be the pinnacle of the temple. So it could have been either one. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that Jesus was being tempted to pitch himself off there and the angels would catch him. Next in the outer court is the Tower of Antonia. Antony overlooked the temple and was the seat of the Roman garrison. So they would have some soldiers there in the barracks. Sometimes it's called that. In Acts 21, it's called the barracks. In John 19:13, when Jesus is on trial, they say they take him to the pavement, place of Roman trials. There's a little bit of difference between the picture that I gave you. It shows the castle of Antonia overlapping the Temple Mount there in the corner. This illustration shows it being outside of the Temple Mount, but there would have been a walkway down into the temple complex, as is stated in the passage in Acts, where Paul was rescued from the mob and then he gives a speech on the stairway up to this fortress complex. So there it is. This is the Roman access to kind of oversee what's going on. If there's any uprisings in the temple, they can send their soldiers right down there and take care of it. The also kind of that open space around the court of the Gentiles and all the excess around where there's the porches and whatnot has been called the Bazaar. Okay, so you got the court of the Gentiles called the Bazaar. Bazaar, like a place of, games and fun and whatnot. Catholics have lots of bazaars, don't they? And it was known in those days as the Bazaar of the Sons of Annas. That's the high priest. And Jesus calls it, you've made my temple, my Father's house, into a den of thieves. Big business there. There were shops. There was the place where they did the money exchange. If you want to give your tithes and offerings, you have to pay it in the temple currency, which couldn't have the face of Caesar on it or an eagle, the imperial eagle. It had to have no images on it, so you had to do a money exchange. If you've ever gone to a foreign country, you know that you give them American dollars, they give you whatever it is, and they don't give you all of its worth. There's an exchange price for changing these things out. I experienced that in England and in Ireland as I was changing in my traveler's checks for British pounds sterling, and I could see what the exchange rate was. It's better to bring your Visa with you if you're traveling. Visa goes everywhere that you go. So the money exchange involved price gouging. That's no good. And high exchange rates. So I give you $1 and you give me 80 cents and the other guy keeps the 20 cents. But now I can go in and I can bring my money into the temple and not be considered to be an idolater. So Jesus was very upset with this whole practice. In Matthew 21, Jesus comes in and he cast out all those who were buying and selling in the temple and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. And he said, is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers. The blind and lame came to him in the temple and he healed them. They didn't like that though, right? Now what's the deal with doves? Doves were for poor people who couldn't bring their own sacrifices from wherever they were from. They didn't have a sheep or a goat to give. They had to go and have 2 turtle doves. That was their sacrifice. This is why we know that Jesus' parents were poor, because that's what they brought when they brought him for circumcision. They brought a couple of turtle doves. They'd wring the neck and they'd cut them open, and that was their sacrifice because it's cheap. Well, it's like, you go to the movies and you got to buy an $8 soda, or you go to Disneyland and you got to buy a $10 hot dog. That's what they were doing there at the temple. You got to come, and so you got to pay the price. And if you couldn't afford it yourself, you're going to pay way more than you want to bring your sacrifices to the Lord. Also, on the walls of the places where they built up the walls and the backfilled, the stones are definitely, they change from the old Temple Mount to the new Temple Mount, and you can tell because they're embossed. They're like this imprint on them, which is an indication of what Herod did on his stones. So that's why Pastor Grant would say totally Herodian. You can tell by the embossment on the stones. Okay, we also got porches that go all the way around the outside of it. You can see on your picture Solomon's porches and royal porches there on your picture. The royal porch was along the south wall, and Solomon's porch or portico was along the eastern wall. It was a place of meeting. This is where Jesus would have taught, in the shade, right? So people could be in the shade or not in the shade and have a place that they could gather and congregate. It's where the early church met. They would gather, and the porches of Solomon is indicated in Acts chapter 3. And we can see Jesus' teaching here is indicated in John chapter 10. There's then the balustrade or the soreg or the dividing wall that we saw in the picture. Again, this thing fence here with little gaps in it It had signs on it that say, if you're a Gentile, don't go past this. And I bet they had gatekeepers, Levite gatekeepers, who were watching that pretty closely. There's a low fence separating the court of the Gentiles, where Gentiles could come and get close, from the actual temple structure where Jews could go in and bring sacrifices and their tithes and offerings and all that kind of stuff. So the sign preventing Gentiles from passing, this is the accusation against Paul in Acts 21. They say that he brought a Gentile into the temple. Well, Gentiles could go into the temple, but only so far. He's saying that Paul snuck Trophimus, a guy from, I think, from Ephesus, into the temple complex through the gate. And he hadn't. He hadn't done that at all. But they saw him in the city with the guy, and so they just jumped to conclusions. Very cool place in Ephesians 2. If you want to understand what in the world Paul is talking about there, you can go listen to my sermon on it. No, Ephesians chapter 2, Paul discusses this wall of separation between Jews and Gentiles and how that wall has been taken away in Jesus Christ. If you don't know something about that Temple Mount, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You're just thinking it's this like concept, this abstract thing. But Jesus says, you remember, Gentiles, that formerly Gentiles of the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by the so-called circumcision, which is performed in the flesh by human hands. Remember that you were at that time separated from Christ, excluded from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers to the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in the world. But, verse 14, Jesus himself is our peace, who made both groups into one and broke down the barrier, or literally the dividing wall of the barrier, by abolishing in his flesh the enmity, the law of commandments contained in ordinances, etc., that he might make the two into one new man, thus establishing peace. So if you're thinking of that complex, there's no wall there anymore in the heavenly Jerusalem, in God's temple of the church. The Jews and the Gentiles are on the same level here as how they can approach God. And they approach God through the blood of Jesus Christ. That's what's symbolic there in that being broken down. It's that wall there on that picture. Core of the women then is inside of that. It's the next layer in. And so we can see here you've got this whole area here. You got these four big corner collection areas. This is where the women could go in. This is where Jesus sees the poor woman put in her little copper coins. There were four large receptacles, one in each corner. For almsgiving, etc. There was also storehouses for the Levites for their work. Oil, wood, for the Nazarites where they keep their vows, they go get their hair cut, and etc. And lepers, where they could go get checked out, so they could go in and then be presentable and be able to be clean again. Also, again, almsgivings for these various groups. Four chambers in the corner served ritual and functional purposes. Beautiful gate, and that is where in Acts 3, Peter and John go to the temple during the hour of prayer. There's a man sitting by the gate. It indicates it's the beautiful gate. He has never walked. He is healed. Peter sees that he has the faith to be healed, and he says, silver and gold have I none, but what I give to you in the name of Jesus. Arise. And he takes up his pallet and he walks and he goes jumping and leaping and praising God. It's at the beautiful gate where that happens. And he's got an audience there right now. They see what happens. They're going in and out of the temple complex. And so right here, he can preach to all these people either on this side or that side. That's where the Acts 3 sermon happens. It's right here at this beautiful gate and in the court of the women. Okay, moving on. You got the court of the priests court of Israel comes next. You pass through Nicanor's gate. This big one right here. And you come into this area in front of the main temple here. But this is where all the sacrifices are going to be going on. Where the lavers, the washing bowls, where the altar is located. That would be in the court of Israel. You pass through Nicanor's gate, which was a gift. There are these semicircular steps, 15 steps. The Levites would be singing. The choir there would be singing. Remember the Psalms of Ascent? You had 15 steps there. And then you get the court of the priests. There's a wall there. You bring your animal. You say, here you go. And then you go, and they cut it, put the hands on it, pray over it, take it to the bowls, clean it out, put it up on the altar. It's a big altar too, 30 feet by 30 feet by 15 feet high with a ramp going up the top. Remember, it's ramp and not steps, so you don't see the priest's undergarments. And then these bowls, lavers, made out of bronze, hammered bronze, containing water. In the Solomon Temple, they were called the Great Sea. There are 12 of them on little wheels so that these guys can scoot it to wherever they're receiving the sacrifice. Wherever they need to wash their hands, they can bring this laver with these bowls of water around for them. The sanctuary itself, that would be this building right here, that kind of T-shaped building. You've got two huge pillars at the entrance, at least there was in the old temple, one named Boaz, one named Yachin. You've got the menorah, that's the candelabra, the candlesticks, seven-fold, that's made of almond blossoms, made to look like almond blossoms. It's golden and has oil that needs to be replaced all the time. There's the table of showbread. There's the incense altar, which they would put that special concoction of stuff on there as they went to pray. There's also a veil that separates the Holy of Holies, very heavy, double thick veil that you would then pass through, which means you lift up one side, you enter it, and then you pass between the veils there, and then you open up the other side so that nobody could see in possibly. Okay, think of it like a big stage veil. Sacrificial ritual that went on every single day. There was twice daily incense burning. That was during times of prayer. You can read about that at Zecharias. John the Baptist's dad did it. We also read about Peter and John going at the hour of prayer. And twice daily burnt offerings that were offered up. The second one was at the same time as the hour of prayer. Yeah, there's Zecharias in Luke chapter 1. They also made offerings for those who were in over them, so they made offerings, probably sin offerings, for the emperor and for the high priest. You remember, he has to make offerings for himself. That's why Jesus is so much better. Though offerings for the emperor were suspended during the first Jewish revolt in AD 66. They're like, we're not offering for this guy anymore. He's a chump. We're out of here. Seasonally, there were 3 offerings or festivals. Pilgrim festivals, Passover or unleavened bread. And you got the day of Passover, you get the 7 days after that of unleavened bread. You got the Feast of Tabernacles or Booths, so everybody camp out on the hillside. And then there was Pentecost, should be P-E-N-T, Pentecost, or first fruits, and that would be 50 days after Passover. And you bring your first of your harvest there on that day. So people come and they bring sacrifices for that as well. You can bring your private peace offerings and then Passover lamb as well. Pretty important on their basically like their New Year's celebration. How they maintain it. Let's finish this up here, and then next episode we'll do the synagogue. They had to pay a half shekel required of every Jewish person for the temple tax for the maintenance of the complex. Pay to the temple for maintenance. You could bring gifts and offerings. People did that often. They had places where you could give there. Nicanor Gate was a gift. Nicanor, that's like a Greek name. People had personal treasures stored at the temple, like a safety deposit box too. So you want something safe, you keep it at the temple because, who can get in there, right? And then the prophets from the Bazaar, the high priestly family of the Sadducees, made the money with money exchange and selling sacrifices for people. Again, the Bazaar of the sons of Annas. So these guys are rich. They're rolling in it, and they're making money hand over fist from the normal dude because, do you ever feel that way? You go to a place and you're like, I can't believe I'm paying this much for the thing, but you're thirsty, so you buy it. All right? Okay, in our next episode, hopefully the last one, we'll discuss what was going on with synagogues and how all that kind of stuff was set up. I'll try to move pretty quickly through that. The religious functionaries in the temple, etc., etc., ad infinitum. Thank you for tuning in. Sorry this one was a little bit long.